Hi everyone, today I'm going to be introducing my new GB Studio plugin, Adventure Reforged. You can grab it from my GBS plugins GitHub repository, which I will link in the description. I might have updated it since I made this video, so also check the description for any updated information. Right now, Adventure Reforged supports version 4.0, but it should also be compatible with 3.2 and anything above that. Once you've downloaded the plugin, you're going to want to take your GBS project folder. Make sure you have a folder in the root of the project called plugins, and then drag in the Adventure Reforged folder like so. And it should look something like this. Anyway, so once you've put it all together, you're going to want to open GB Studio, or if you have it open, restart it, and start making a project. I'm going to show you guys a project I made earlier with a few examples of stuff that Adventure Reforged does. The first thing that this plugin does is it changes player movement quite significantly. So in the base version of GB Studio, the adventure scene mode has kind of jittery movement. I've reworked the movement a little bit so that it's less jittery, the camera scrolls nicely, and the performance should also be slightly better, depending on whether I update this or not. That may or may not still be true. But yeah, the performance should be slightly better. So it's just out of the box without doing anything. As long as you've installed the plugin, you should see that your movement is slightly more performant and smoother. You can have multiple enemies running around, and you shouldn't notice too many frame drops even on DMG. The next thing that this plugin adds is solid actors. So these signs are actually actors, but they are solid, which is not included by default in adventure mode in GB Studio. So you can interact with them like regular actors. And the way you set this up is literally just by setting the actors collision group to none. So that means it won't have an on a hit script, it will have an on interact script, and it will be solid. There's a couple of things you need to look out for though when you're using solid actors. So you can't have the solid actors move around. Here's an example of a solid actor that moves around, but it means that the player gets stuck in the solid actor. If you do that, you shouldn't do that. So you should always avoid solid actors moving into the player. There are some situations where you will want moving solid actors, but make sure that they can't move into the player because that will cause them to get stuck. A good example of where you would want moving solid actors is like blocks that you can push. That should be fine as long as you can't push them into yourself, if that makes sense. Another thing you're going to want to avoid is non-solid actors overlapping solid actors. And the reason for that is in the GB Studio collision in the engine, the player can only collide with one actor at a time. So say there was a non-solid actor on top of this sign, the player would ignore the sign and collide with the non-solid actor instead and be able to walk into the sign. So try to avoid non-solid actors walking over the top of solid actors, or your player might get stuck in the solid actor. The next feature is illustrated here, toggleable background collision. So in this scene, we have an actor acting as a door, and then we have these enemies running around. But like I said, you don't want to have non-solid actors running around where there's a solid actor. So how can we have a door in this scenario? Well, we don't actually use a solid actor for the door. This actor is just there for the looks, to make it look like there's a door. It doesn't actually have any collision on it. The collision we're using is this background collision here, and you can probably see this is toggleable a background collision. The way you make it is you draw a regular background collision and then you put a ladder on top. I'm going to go and get rid of that. So this section here of background collision is toggleable. How do you toggle it on and off? Well, you'll see in this script, if player enemies defeated is more than 2, you use the engine field update event. So you can get to that really easily by going engine field update. You scroll down and you pick Toggleable Collision. You either have it passable or impassable. So by using that, you can create doors and stuff that you can turn on and off, and you won't have to worry about non-solid actors getting stuck in solid actors. In the future, I'd like to develop this feature a little further, maybe with the new spare collision types that you can use in the engine. But for now, it's just quite simple. And I think there might be some cool applications for it that I haven't thought of. To avoid some sticky situations, I also made it so that actors um, can never pass through toggleable collision, whether it's on or off. You might also have noticed, like in this situation, actors are actually able to pass through the player, which I think is good behavior to have in adventure mode so they can damage you, like typical action games like Zelda, etc. Usually you would need my actors pass through actors plugin to have this behavior in adventure mode, but it's included by default in Adventure Reforged because I think pretty much everyone wants that behavior. And if we go down here, we can see another feature I've added, swimming. So swimming basically overrides the player's movement completely and adds in a swimming movement style where you tap A to swim around, inspired by a certain item from Zelda. But if you want to use this, it's done in a similar way to toggleable collision. So I've made a big trigger over the swimming area. When you enter it, you set the engine field swimming to swimming, and then when you leave it, you set the engine field swimming to not swimming. And that's as simple as it gets, basically. That's all you have to do, and swimming movement will be enabled and disabled. One other thing I should mention is all the actor or all the player speeds are hard coded in this plugin to make the movement a little bit nicer. So you can't change the player speed from what it is here when you're walking on land, and you also can't change the swimming player speeds. If you want to do that, you might have to dive into the engine a little bit, or maybe I'll add it in a future update. That just about wraps it up for this video. I've tried to include pretty much everything that I would think people would want for a basic action RPG, and it's a little bit clunky right now, but you can really make a lot more stuff with just these small extra tools, and hopefully the games that you make should also feel a little bit more polished. So I hope people find this useful. If you have any feedback, I would really value feedback, whether you leave it here, YouTube comments, or on my Twitter, which will also be linked in the description. You can also check out my Patreon, where I did share this plugin a little early for some feedback. If you want to support me, you can do so on the Patreon. And if you want some little insights into what I'm doing, also check it out. Of course, you can also go to GB Studio Lab, my website, where there's a bunch of free tutorials about making stuff in GB Studio and even how I make engine edits like this one. And if you don't have any particular feedback for me, I'd also like it if you sent me what you've made with the plugin, because it's always nice seeing other people's awesome GB Studio projects. All right, I'm going to leave it there for this video. I will see you guys in the next one.